title, founding president of PharmAla Biotech, Inc. Tell us a little bit about what your focus is.
Well, my background is in regulatory and government relations. So I've spent about the last decade, I got my start in government long time ago, spent about the last decade running regulatory departments for large corporations. And about a year ago, I joined the board of a company called Psych Wellness, which is commercializing a mushroom called Amanita muscaria. So I went down the rabbit hole, so to speak, on psychedelics pretty hard. Just at the end of last year, we started PharmAla Biotech. We're a B2B business, so we don't focus on the end user very much, but our goal is to focus on MDMA and the MDXX class, so like the analogs of MDMA. And we're developing manufacturing, but also some novel approaches to formulating these compounds.
Okay, so I love someone who has such a polished intro that, like, oh, I've said this 100 times. This is no problem. But you said it so verbatim that I've actually heard you say that exactly that.
Well, I mean, like, okay, so the secret to that is we've just done a fundraising round, and so for the past 2 weeks, I've been like back to back with investors, basically saying the exact same thing over and over and over again, which is, mea culpa, but that's how it goes.
But as a journalist who has done her due diligence, I've watched many of your interviews, so down to the like, oh, and then I went down the rabbit hole with your kind of
yeah. Okay, you called me on it. It's true. I have said those words before. Oh, you should do political journalism. You do very well. You got to call them out on that stuff.
Thank you. That means a lot. So what? And I'm just going to zoom in on something you said. But what did going down the rabbit hole actually mean?
Well, like a couple of things. I didn't have any capital markets experience, but I learned a lot through the process of Psych going public. And I've always been really interested in MDMA as a molecule. I've always thought it had great clinical potential. I am on record in like saying that, like, at this time, I don't think we have the data to prove that these molecules are appropriate for a recreational market. But my background is obviously regulatory. I've been a huge harm reduction advocate for a very long time. Like, I don't think that these molecules should have ever been made illegal. I think that was like totally off base. So what we're left with is medicine, right? These are functionally, these are therapeutic molecules. They shouldn't be illegal. They shouldn't be recreational. They should be regulated as medicine. Obviously, I've been following Rick Doblin and MAPS for a very long time. I mean, Rick's really like, I can't speak of him highly enough. He's been working on this for longer than I've been alive, which is saying something. He's had amazing breakthroughs, especially over the last 5 years, culmination of a life's work. But what we're focused on as a company is, going back to my regulatory background, regulators look at medicines through two lenses, right? Efficacy and safety. And I think most companies in this space are focused on efficacy, right? Proving that the molecule does what they think it does, right? It has this therapeutic effect, it has this clinical indication. We're actually focused on the safety side. And so I think we're a little bit different in that respect.
Okay, there's a few things you said that were really interesting that are really good jump off points. And I was going to say this for the end, but I want to ask it now. You saying that psychedelics aren't necessarily fit as a recreational product. Mm-hmm. Or I guess you could say-
I just said we don't have the data yet. I think it's really so what I've seen in a lot of different industries, I worked for Red Bull, and I don't know if you remember, but in 2013, like, Red Bull is just caffeine. There's really nothing there that's like novel or revolutionary at all. It's caffeine in a can. Hopefully my old friends at Red Bull don't mind me saying that. But in 2013, there was this whole moral panic about like kids drinking Red Bull and energy drinks. What impact is it having on their bodies? This is huge hubbub. And Health Canada regulated those products like very stringently compared to other caffeinated drinks. Like Starbucks has no regulation on it. And so one of the things I learned over my career is you have to be very careful when you're in an industry like this that's in the limelight, because for us, we're always hungry for change. We want to move quickly. But for the regular population, they are not in the same headspace, right? And so our focus on safety, our entire posture is around, being responsible and moving the category forward, but you don't want to get ahead of yourself. And I, like what I said was, I don't think we have the data yet to push for full recreational use of these products. And I think it's going to take us a number of years to, even for some molecules, it may never come. We may never have the data, but I don't think for any of these molecules, we have the data to prove out, like, these should be recreational use today.
Right.
Doesn't mean we can't get that in the future.
Yeah, and you had projected about 10 years as clinical use before potentially.
Depending on the molecule, right? Like, I mean, I think we're probably, for something like psilocybin, we might be a little bit closer. For something like MDMA, we might be a little bit further. But it really, I think you have to look at it on a molecule by molecule basis.
And why MDMA for you in particular? Why is that?
Number one, I think the entire entheogen class is like super interesting. Like lots of amazing uses, that we can't really do with any of the other molecules. And we found this really, really amazing sort of approach where, we're fairly confident based on our preclinical data that we can, reduce the toxicity of MDMA and other molecules in its class. Now, most toxicologists will say the dose makes the poison. So, if you take less, then, less toxic. And that's correct, 100%. But I think if you look at it through the lens of, making these products more available for more treatments, you have to address two things. You have to address, the objective toxicological truth, but you also have to address like people's view of it, right? Like going back to that conversation we were just having about like moving the category forward to towards more acceptability. And so I think that a focus on safety kind of hits on both levels.
Yeah, and what's really interesting too is even in some of these mainstream articles that are coming out, it's still any trial or breakthrough with MDMA is always prefaced by saying the once party drug is now proving to be something.
Exactly.
Oh, okay. So
exactly. And there's always going to be some offhand mention about like hyperthermia or neurotoxicity, and these things are based in reality, right? Like it's not like none of these things have ever happened. We can't chalk it up to just like it's made up.
So the psychedelic boom that we've seen over the last year. Mm-hmm. Two things. So this question in two parts. One, what impact do you think that COVID has had on our desire to look more seriously at mental health? And two, will this boom continue?
Maybe I'll take them backwards. Obviously it's my fervent hope that it does. I think we've seen a lot of movement on the category, and that's good. It's a great thing, right? Yes, I think that I think COVID has made us reassess a lot of things. It's made people pay attention to sort of the foundations of our healthcare system and how we treat a range of conditions, not just mental health issues, but more broadly. Like certainly, like if you look at long-term care, that's due for a very, very like timely reassessment, right? And my hope is, again, political background. I was looking at the federal budget. There's a lot of money and a lot of focus on the life sciences, both research and manufacturing and whatever, what have you. So my real hope is that we don't let, preconceived notions about psychedelics get in the way of actually using that money to drive the category forward. I think it would be great to have the government as a partner rather than like an opponent on this, because there's a lot of good work that can be done.
And can you maybe as succinctly as possible, just give an example of one of those preconceived notions, just so we have a true understanding?
Oh, sure. Of course. I mean, one of the things that Rick has done is, he basically got the FDA to grant breakthrough status to MDMA. And I mean, like if you're ever talking to Rick, you can get him to tell the story of that. But like, it's a hugely brutal process, right? Like you have to show them like 10 times more data to prove your case with an illegal molecule than you would with like a novel molecule that nobody's ever heard of that you just invented, right? And we see this with a whole range of issues. And this is one of the other things that I'm hoping changes post-COVID is, there is more of an appetite in the political class to look at things that like we think we understand and we think we know, look at them with fresh eyes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. With all these psychedelic companies that are starting to come out, what would you say is something important for investors to consider and to look at when they're considering supporting?
Well, I mean, we just had a very successful fundraising round. So, obviously all the investors that invested in us, brilliant people who understand the future of this category so well. Yeah, absolutely. And to my investors, thank you. Thank you very much. No, look, yeah, there's a lot of stuff. I think again, you've done your homework on me, so you probably heard me say this before. Is like you really have to focus on like the clinical, like evidence base and the clinical science behind the product, because at the end of the day, if we agree with my sort of initial statement that these are not recreational products, these are medical therapeutics, then the science has to underpin everything we do. And if you're investing in a company, just like dig deep and try to suss out whether they really have something real or not, because if they don't, you may be making a bad investment. But I will say, like, I was fairly impressed with the, just in this fundraising round, the level of sort of technical details that investors were interested in. The sophistication in this space has gone up significantly, even in the last 6 months.
And finally, is there a piece of news or clinical trial that is of particular interest to you, or something that's made you really excited?
Oh yeah. Yeah, again, I've talked about MAPS a lot, but they just published in Nature their first tranche of data from their phase 3 clinical trial for PTSD. It's remarkable, right? And for those of us who've been following this for a while, I don't think it was a surprise, but I think it might have broken through into the public consciousness in a big way for the first time. But it's functionally like, I hesitate to use the word cure, but it might be the most appropriate one. They basically found, a combination therapy of psychotherapy and MDMA over several sessions can functionally cure PTSD. It's remarkable.
It is remarkable. What an incredible thing to be able to say.
Absolutely. It's look, I think that there's a range of applicable indications for MDMA and other chemicals in the class. I know of, at the very least, clinical research being done on eating disorders, alcohol use disorders, and I think the holy grail for me would be couples therapy. I think MDMA should be, in many ways, for difficult cases of couples therapy, I think it would be a brilliant, first order medicine.
Wonderful. Noted. Finally, just looking forward to the rest of the year. What's the best case scenario, biggest piece of news that you would hope would happen to close out 2021?
Oh God, I don't know. Definitely look, the final changes to the SAP, the Special Access Program that Health Canada announced back in December. I think that would be nice to get before we get too far down the track. Hopefully before there's an election. I think for Canadians, if we're looking here, that's big news. And then more approvals, or even continued support from the FDA. Guys who work in the U.S. on these issues, they play they play this terrible game where they're basically trying to get data to the FDA, and they're constantly being, for lack of a better word, in many cases harassed by the DEA. And of course, those agencies have different mandates. I get it; it's push and pull, but I hope continued support from the FDA would go a long way to make sure that clinical research can continue to be done. And, we can continue to gather the evidence that we need to prove out the therapeutic value of the molecule.
Thank you so much.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much.